Hey, well, tonight I'm angry because the system is well and truly broken, and it is broken for everybody. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, it is broken. Let's talk about the Republican position first, since it's in the news today. You may have noticed that there was supposed to be a confirmation of the president-elect today. They were attempting to count the Electoral College votes when protests interrupted the count. Protesters who believe that this election is invalid because illegal votes were cast. Protesters who are unhappy because they haven't been able to get any satisfaction in the court. They haven't been able to have their voices heard. They haven't been able to have their cases heard. And this is exactly the reason that the previous protesters had for their protests. They felt that they were not getting their issues addressed in court. They were against police brutality. And you may look back at this channel early in May and June of 2020. You can see that we did address this issue of police brutality. This was after George Floyd died while in police custody. And my complaint was that the protests were being hijacked. The original protests were a complaint against police brutality, just as Colin Kaepernick originally was kneeling on the field to protest police brutality. Everything gets turned into something else, and the protests became a Black Lives Matter issue, whereas the original point of the protest became lost. The original point was the fact that police have different rights than we do. They have qualified immunity. They have police unions that give them better rights, better protections than we have. And these protests originally were designed to complain about the fact that black people, specifically, were not being protected by the law. These protests today are exactly the same protest. Republicans, or people who supported Donald Trump at least, are complaining that they are not being protected by the law. The law, they claim, should be the law. It's not. Pennsylvania can change the election laws in contravention of state statute. Nobody cares. The Supreme Court refuses to hear it. The Supreme Court says you have no standing. The Supreme Court says you can't sue until you've suffered damages. After damages, the Supreme Court says you can't sue after the fact. People are starting to become frustrated as they realize that the system does not work. It doesn't not only not work as intended, it doesn't work at all. What police reforms have we seen? All of the violence, outrage, pain, fear through the summer, what did it accomplish? What reforms were gained? Do police have more fear of being sued by citizens? Is qualified immunity less of a problem? Are police now on the hook for damages themselves instead of the citizens of the city paying out the damages? No, everything is exactly as it was. How are things with this election that the other side is upset about, the Republicans? They're exactly the same. No one's talking about paper trails. No one's talking about changing the election. When you have large groups of the population that are completely disenfranchised, you have turmoil, you have riots, and if you don't solve the problem, you have a civil war, which is when both groups feel that the only option is to fight for their rights. This is what we saw over the summer with the liberals. This is what we're about to see now with the conservatives. It is very dangerous when our institutions refuse to address our concerns. When the Supreme Court punted, when the Supreme Court refused to deal with the question of whether these elections were fair or not, half the country, if not more, is convinced that the election was stolen. The other half is convinced that the country is racist, and neither side believes that they can get any protection from the courts anymore. If both sides believe that the courts are not going to protect them, neither side is going to go to the courts for relief. Watching what happened today in Washington, watching the sanctimonious posing by all of the congressmen, senators, claiming that they were supporting democracy, claiming that they were protecting people's votes, claiming that people shouldn't be disenfranchised by having their votes not count. Whichever way you go, half of the people are going to believe that that has been done to them. There needs to be transparency. There needs to be a resolution sweeping everything under the rug. If they approve the electoral count tonight, I don't think that the conservative mob is going to disappear. If they don't fix police brutality, I don't think the liberal mob's going to disappear. We're going to have mob rule in this country, and I blame the Senate. I blame the House. I blame the Supreme Court. I blame our leaders, all of whom stand there speaking sanctimoniously to us about high moral principles, and all of whom wallow in the mud with carefree aplomb while we look on in horror as our institutions get muddied. Are we going to demand better at any point? Could I ask anybody to wake up?